me not see it.
I never used to be the kind of person who looked over their shoulder. I liked my privacy, sure, but I wasn't paranoid. That changed when I bought that place in the suburbs. It was one of those modern, smart houses where everything is connected to a central hub. At first, it felt like living in the future. I could talk to the walls to dim the lights, check the contents of my fridge from my phone at the grocery store, and set the temperature before I even got home from work. It was convenient until it started to feel like the house was developing a personality of its own, and that personality hated me. It started with the thermostat in the middle of a humid summer. I'd come home and set the air conditioning to a crisp 70 degrees, but within 10 minutes, I'd feel a heavy, suffocating heat rolling off the vents. I'd walk over to the wall unit and find the digital display cranked up to 90. I figured it was just a glitch in the software, maybe a sync error with the app on my phone. I reset the system, but the next night, it happened again. I woke up drenched in sweat, gasping for air in a bedroom that felt like a sauna. The display wasn't just at 90 anymore. It was pushed to the absolute limit of the system, and the heater was roaring in the dead of July. Then the lights began their own little performances. It wasn't just a flicker or a bulb burning out. At exactly midnight, the smart LEDs in the long hallway leading to my bedroom would start to strobe. It wasn't a random pattern. It was a rhythmic, aggressive pulsing of blinding white light that made the shadows on the walls dance and stretch in ways that made my stomach churn. I'd stand there in the dark, watching the flashes, feeling a deep, primal sense of dread. It felt like someone was trying to trigger a seizure or just break my spirit through sleep deprivation. I called the tech support line, and they told me to change my passwords and update the firmware. I did all of that. I used complex strings of characters that no one could guess. I thought I was safe. But 2 nights later, I was in the kitchen making a late-night snack when the Alexa unit on the counter turned its blue ring toward me. I didn't say the wake word. I didn't even have any music playing. Then, a voice started coming out of the speaker. It wasn't the usual synthetic assistant voice. It was me. It was a recording of a private conversation I'd had with my sister 2 nights prior. We had been talking about my recent breakup, and I had been crying, saying things I would never want anyone else to hear. The audio was crystal clear. I could hear my own ragged breathing and the wet sound of my voice breaking. It played for 30 seconds before cutting off with a sharp, digital pop. I stood there in the silence of my kitchen, clutching a steak knife, feeling a cold sweat break out across my neck. Someone wasn't just hacking my devices, they were listening. They were archiving my life. The next morning, I received an email from a nonsense string of letters and numbers. There was no subject line. The body of the email contained 4 words that made my heart stop. You look tired tonight. I felt a wave of nausea hit me so hard I had to lean against the wall. To know I looked tired, they had to be seeing me. I looked around the kitchen, my eyes landing on the smart fridge. It had a built-in camera inside to help you see your groceries, but there was also a small lens on the exterior for family photos and video calls. I looked at the Alexa, which had the drop-in feature enabled, a feature that allows approved contacts to start an instant video or audio call. I hadn't approved anyone, but clearly that didn't matter to this person. I went into a frenzy. I ran through the house, ripping the router out of the wall and smashing it on the floor. I grabbed a ladder and started unscrewing every smart bulb, tossing them into a cardboard box. I felt like a man possessed, trying to blind the eyes that were stitched into the very fabric of my home. I factory reset the fridge, the TV, and the security cameras. I thought if I cut the connection to the outside world, I would finally be alone again. But that's the thing about these systems. Once they're in, you don't really know if they ever truly leave. That night, with the house plunged into a forced, analog darkness, I sat on my bed with a heavy flashlight. The silence was heavy, almost physical. I finally felt a sliver of peace, thinking I had one. Then I heard a sound that didn't come from a speaker. It was a dull, rhythmic thudding coming from beneath the floorboards. It sounded like something heavy being dragged through the crawl space. I froze. My mind tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just the pipes cooling down or a stray animal. But then I heard the sound of a physical click. It was the manual deadbolt on my bedroom door sliding into the locked position. I hadn't touched it. My eyes darted to the door, and I saw the small, motorized housing I'd installed for remote locking. Even without the router, even without the internet, it was moving. I scrambled off the bed and grabbed the handle, twisting it frantically, but the electronic lock held firm. I was trapped in my own bedroom. Then, the smart TV across from my bed flickered to life. I hadn't plugged it back in. I had pulled the cord from the outlet myself. Yet, the screen glowed with a sickening, static-filled light. A video began to play. It was a live feed from a camera angle I didn't recognize. The perspective was low, looking up from floor level. It took me a moment to realize what I was looking at. The camera was hidden inside the air vent at the base of my wall, looking directly at my bed. In the frame, I could see myself sitting on the edge of the mattress, looking terrified. But that wasn't the worst part. In the video, I could see the shadow of someone standing directly behind my headboard. They were pressed against the wall, hidden in the narrow gap between the wood and the drywall. I spun around, shining my flashlight into the darkness behind the bed. There was nothing there but the wall. I turned back to the TV screen. The figure in the video was reaching out, a pale, spindly hand emerging from the shadows to hover just inches above my hair. In the video, I saw myself react to a phantom chill, shivering while the hand stayed perfectly still. I realized then that this person wasn't just a hacker in some distant basement across the ocean. They had been in the house the entire time. They had used the smart features as distraction, a way to keep my eyes on my phone and my gadgets while they moved through the literal bones of the building. They had probably been the ones who installed the system in the first place, or at least modified it before I moved in. I began to scream, pounding on the door, but the house was well insulated, designed for privacy. I heard a soft, metallic scrape. The air vent cover at the base of the wall began to slide open. It wasn't controlled by an app. It was being pushed from the inside. I didn't wait to see what came out of that hole. I threw my body against the bedroom window, shattering the double-paned glass and tumbling out onto the mulch of the flower bed below. I didn't stop running until I reached a neighbor's house 3 doors down. The police came, but by the time they breached the front door, the house was silent. They found the router smashed, the bulbs in the box, and the TV unplugged. When they checked the bedroom, the air vent was back in place, screwed tight from the outside. They looked in the crawl space and found a small, narrow mattress, a laptop with 3 external hard drives, and several empty containers of food. There were also dozens of printed photos of me, sleeping, eating, showering, all taken from angles I never would have suspected. The most unsettling thing they found was a small, surgical-grade microphone wire directly into the headboard of my bed. It wasn't connected to the internet. It was connected to a pair of headphones left sitting on the little mattress in the crawl space. They never caught him. My lawyer says the house is a crime scene, but I'll never go back there. I live in an old apartment now, one with radiator heat and manual locks. I don't even have a microwave. But sometimes, when I'm lying in bed in the middle of the night, I hear a faint, digital hum coming from the walls. I find myself staring at the smoke detector, wondering if that little red light is just a power indicator, or if someone, somewhere, is finally seeing that I look tired.
Next story.
I never really considered myself a paranoid person, but there's a specific kind of chill that crawls up your spine when you realize your own home isn't private anymore. I'm a tech student, so I'm used to my gear acting up, but this was different. My laptop, which usually runs like a dream, started dying within 20 minutes of being unplugged. Even when I had it hooked up to the wall, the battery icon would just sit there, draining steadily as if something inside the machine was screaming for power. The fan was constantly whirring, high and thin, like a tea kettle left on a burner way too long. I figured it was a bloated battery or maybe some malware I'd picked up while downloading research papers. I started digging into the background processes, looking for whatever was hogging the CPU. That's when I saw it. There was an application running called WinVNC. I hadn't installed it. For those who don't know, VNC is a way to remotely control a computer from a different location. It's supposed to be for tech support or accessing your office PC from home, but seeing it on my personal machine made my stomach do a slow, sick flip. I traced the file path, my heart thumping against my ribs. It led me deep into a system directory, buried inside a folder someone had named temp_data. It was hidden behind layers of administrative permissions that no average user would ever stumble across. When I finally forced the folder open, my breath just hitched in my throat. I sat there in the dark of my bedroom, the blue light of the screen reflecting in my glasses, staring at thousands of image files. I clicked the first one. It was a screenshot of my desktop from months ago. I clicked the next, then the next. Every 30 seconds, for months on end, a screenshot had been taken and saved. I saw myself scrolling through social media. I saw my bank logins, my passwords, my private messages to my friends. I saw screenshots of my Skype calls with my mom, her smiling face captured in a grainy, frozen moment while I was talking about my day. But as I scrolled further down, the bile started rising in my throat. The screenshots weren't just of my screen anymore. The program had been triggering my webcam too. There were images of me sitting at my desk, eating dinner alone in my pajamas. There were images of me getting ready for bed, catching the edge of the frame as I moved around my room. The worst part was the realization that the folder was set to auto-upload to a remote server. Every single one of these moments had been sent somewhere else. Someone had been watching my life in real time, like a silent, digital ghost sitting right on my shoulder. I knew exactly who did it. My ex-boyfriend had fixed my laptop a few months back when it was lagging. He was the only person with the password, the only one I trusted with my tech. We had broken up shortly after that, and he had seemed so strangely fine with it. Now I knew why. He never actually left. He was still in the room with me every single night. The deeper I went into the folder, the more the horror shifted from digital to something much more physical. I found a subfolder near the bottom of the directory. It didn't have a name, just a string of random characters. I opened it, expecting more webcam shots. Instead, I found photos that weren't taken by the laptop. They were taken from a high angle, looking down at my bed. The perspective was from the ceiling vent. The images were dark, grainy, and shot with some kind of night vision filter that turned everything a sickly, neon green. In the photos, I was asleep. But I wasn't alone. In the corner of the frame, there was a shape. It was him. He wasn't just watching through the screen, he was coming into the apartment while I was passed out. He was standing in the corner of my room, just watching me breathe. In one photo, he was sitting on the edge of my bed, leaning over so close that his face was inches from mine. He had a pair of my surgical scissors from my medkit in his hand, and he was just holding them open, the blades resting right against the pulse point in my neck. I felt like I was going to vomit. The air in my apartment felt heavy and cold, like it was pressing in on my lungs. I realized with a jolt of pure terror that the most recent screenshot was time-stamped only 2 minutes ago. He was watching the screen right now. He knew I was looking at the folder. I stood up so fast my chair fell over. I needed to get out, but as I turned toward my bedroom door, I heard it. The soft, heavy thud of someone moving in the crawl space above the ceiling. It wasn't a mechanical sound. It was the sound of weight shifting, of floorboards groaning under a human body. I didn't grab my phone. I didn't grab my keys. I just bolted for the front door. But as I reached the hallway, The vent cover in the ceiling didn't just rattle, it slammed open. He didn't drop down gracefully. He fell, a tangled mess of limbs and greasy hair, landing hard on the hardwood floor. He was thinner than I remembered, his eyes wide and bloodshot, fixed on me with a look of such intense, frantic ownership that I couldn't even scream. He had a utility knife in his hand, the kind with the break-off blades. He didn't say a word. He just lunged. I threw my arms up to protect my face, and I felt the cold, sharp bite of the steel zip across my forearm. The pain was immediate and blinding, a hot, searing line that turned my skin into a fountain of crimson. I felt the warmth of my own blood soaking into my sleeve, dripping onto the floor in heavy, wet thuds. I kicked out, catching him in the chest, and scrambled toward the kitchen. I grabbed the first thing my hand touched, a heavy cast iron skillet sitting on the stove. When he came at me again, his face twisted into this horrible, silent snarl. I swung with everything I had. The sound of the metal hitting his temple was sickening, a dull, wet thud that I can still feel in my teeth when I think about it. He hit the floor hard, his head bouncing once, and for a second, he just stayed there, his breathing ragged and wet. I didn't wait to see if he'd get up. I ran out the front door, screaming for help, my blood trailing behind me like a red ribbon on the carpet. I didn't stop until I reached the street, until I saw the headlights of a passing car. The police found him 10 minutes later. He wasn't in the kitchen anymore. He had crawled back into the crawl space, dragging a trail of his own blood up the wall and through the vent. They found a sleeping bag up there, surrounded by empty water bottles and hundreds of printed out photos of me. Some of them had been modified. He had used a red marker to draw lines where he wanted to cut me, mapping out my body like a piece of meat. They caught him 3 blocks away, hiding in a dumpster, his head still leaking blood from where I'd hit him. He's behind bars now, but the damage is done. Every time I look at a screen, I feel like someone is looking back. Every time my phone battery drops a percentage, I wonder if there's a hidden process running that I can't see. The worst part isn't the physical scar on my arm or the way I jump at every sound in the attic. It's that I know he's still out there, waiting. And even though I wiped that laptop and threw it in a lake, I know those thousands of images are still on a server somewhere. He saw everything. He knows my routine, my fears, and the exact way I look when I'm most vulnerable. Sometimes, when it's late and the house is quiet, I swear I can still hear the faint, high-pitched roar of a laptop fan coming from inside the walls.
Next story.
I never really thought much about the people I went to high school with after we graduated. Most of them just became faces I'd scroll past on a feed, background characters in a life I'd moved on from. There was this one guy, though. Let's call him Elias. He was one of those kids who sat in the back of the class, always messing with some kind of tech, never really saying much to anyone. He wasn't exactly a creep back then, just a ghost. But about a year ago, he started popping up in my notifications. It started with a like here and there, then a casual reply to one of my Instagram stories. It felt normal, or at least normal for the way people interact now. He'd make a joke about a meme I posted or ask where I got a specific brand of shoes. I didn't think twice about it. That was my first mistake. You think you're just sharing bits of your day with friends, but you're actually leaving a breadcrumb trail for anyone who knows how to follow it. The situation took a turn for the worse during a weekend trip I took to Chicago. I live several states away, about a 5-hour drive, and I really needed the break. I decided to go solo, just to clear my head and get some shopping done. I was being very deliberate about not posting anything. I wanted to be off the grid for a few days, away from the constant noise of the internet. I hadn't tagged myself at the airport, hadn't posted my hotel room view, and I certainly hadn't told anyone from my hometown where I was going. I was walking down Michigan Avenue, the wind whipping through the buildings with that biting, lakefront chill. I had this bright blue scarf wrapped tight around my neck, tucked into my heavy wool coat. It was a new purchase, something I'd bought specifically for the trip because I'd forgotten my usual red one at home. I was standing at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a DM from Elias. My stomach did a weird little flip when I read it. The message just said, "The blue scarf looks better than the red one." I froze. I didn't move even when the light turned green and people started pushing past me. I looked around, my heart suddenly hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I scanned the faces of the tourists, the commuters, the people huddled in their collars. I expected to see him standing there, maybe across the street or leaning against a lamppost with a smug look on his face. But there was no one I recognized. I was 300 miles from home in a city of millions. There was no logical way he could know what I was wearing. I tried to convince myself it was a lucky guess. Maybe he'd seen an old photo of the red scarf and just assumed I was wearing something else. But the phrasing was too specific. He didn't say, "I bet you look good in blue." He said, "The blue scarf looks better." Present tense. Like he was looking right at me. I ducked into a crowded coffee shop about a block away, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. I went straight to the back, choosing a table that was tucked into a dark corner, far away from the windows. I sat there for 20 minutes, staring at the door, waiting for him to walk in. I felt sick. The kind of sick where you can feel your pulse in your fingertips. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? That a guy from high school complimented my outfit? It sounded ridiculous when I said it out loud. Then my phone buzzed again. "Don't be shy," the message read. "The latte is on me." I nearly dropped my phone. I hadn't even ordered a drink yet. I was just sitting there, trying to disappear. I looked up at the barista, a young guy with a nose ring who was busy steaming milk. I looked at the few other customers. None of them were looking at me. They were all buried in their laptops or staring at their own screens. I felt this crushing weight of being watched by someone who wasn't physically there. It was a digital haunting. I left the shop immediately, practically running back to my hotel. I spent the rest of the night with the curtains drawn and the door deadbolt. I didn't sleep. Every time the building settled or a car honked outside, I jumped. I spent hours scrolling through my phone, trying to figure out how he was doing it. I checked my privacy settings, my location sharing, everything. It all seemed locked down. When I got home 2 days later, I took my phone to a friend of mine who works in cybersecurity. I didn't tell him who I thought was behind it, just that I felt like I was being tracked. He spent an hour digging through my background processes while I sat on his couch, chewing my fingernails down to the quick. He eventually looked up, his face pale and grim. He told me I had a piece of stalkerware installed on my device. It wasn't a standard app you'd find on the home screen. It was hidden deep in the system files, disguised as a battery optimizer. It had full access to my GPS, my camera, and my microphone. It had been there for months. He asked me if I'd let anyone use my phone recently, and then it clicked. A few months back, at a local bar, I'd run into Elias. He asked to use my phone to call his ride because his own battery had died. I handed it over without a second thought. It only takes a minute if you know what you're doing. But that didn't explain the scarf. Even with my GPS coordinates, he couldn't see what I was wearing through a phone buried in my coat pocket. My friend kept digging, and that's when he found the browser history that the malware was syncing to a remote server. Elias wasn't just watching my location. He was using my exact coordinates to cross-reference with public data. He was logging into live city weather cams and traffic feed cameras in real time. In a city like Chicago, there are cameras on every street corner, every intersection, and every major building. Most of them are public or easily hackable if you have the right IP addresses. Elias would wait for my GPS dot to stop at a red light, then he'd pull up the nearest traffic camera feed. He'd zoom in from his bedroom, hundreds of miles away, and watch me walk down the street in high definition. He saw me wait for that light on Michigan Avenue. He saw me walk into that coffee shop. He was probably watching me right now, through the lens of a camera I hadn't even noticed. The realization felt like a bucket of ice water being poured down my spine. The world felt incredibly small and dangerously transparent. I wasn't a person to him. I was just a flickering image on a monitor, a piece of content he could manipulate and monitor at will. I changed my number, factory reset my phone, and even moved to a new apartment, but the damage was already done. The psychological toll is something I can't quite shake. Every time I'm out in public now, I find myself looking up. I don't look at the people around me anymore. I look at the poles, the corners of buildings, and the little black glass domes mounted on the ceilings of stores. I know they're there. I know that somewhere, someone could be sitting in a dark room, toggling a joystick, and watching me live my life through a grain of digital salt. I see a camera at an intersection, and I wonder if he's still got the link saved. I wonder if he's comparing the coat I'm wearing today to the one I wore back then. The worst part isn't that he was watching. The worst part is that I'll never know for sure if he ever stopped. Every time I walk, under a lens, I feel a phantomage on the back of my neck, like a finger tracing my skin from a distance. He didn't just follow me to Chicago. He followed me into a version of the world where I am never, ever alone. I haven't posted a photo of myself in 6 months. I keep my curtains closed, even during the day. Sometimes, when I'm sitting in my living room, I'll see the little green light on my laptop flicker for just a microsecond. It's probably just an update or a glitch in the hardware. That's what I tell myself anyway. But then I remember the blue scarf, and I remember how clear the picture must have been from that traffic cam, and I realize that in this world, there is no such thing as a closed door.
Next story. Next story is yours. Take a look at the shadow in the corner of your room. Are you sure it was that shape a minute ago? Subscribe or be the next in line.